Go-Between by L.P. Hartley, abridged by Micheline Wander. The reader is John Rowe. Part 1, The Diary.
The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. When I came upon the diary, it was lying at the bottom of a rather battered red cardboard collar box, in which as a small boy I kept my Eton collars. Someone, probably my mother, had filled it with treasures dating from those days. And as I handled them for the first time for over 50 years, a recollection of what each had meant to me came back. Something came and went between us, the almost mystical thrill of early ownership, feelings of which at 60-odd I felt ashamed. It was a roll call in reverse. The children of the past announced their names, and I said, "Here." Only the diary refused to disclose its identity. My first impression was that it was a present someone had brought me from abroad. The shape of the diary, the purple limp leather curling upwards at the corners, gave it a foreign look, and it had, I could see, gold edges. I did not want to touch it, and told myself that this was because it challenged my memory. I was proud of my memory, and disliked having it prompted. So I sat staring at the diary, as at a blank space in a crossword puzzle. After a timeless interval, its secret flashed upon me. Yet even then, I did not want to touch it. Indeed, my unwillingness increased, for now I knew why I distrusted it. I felt, with a bitter blend of self-pity and self-reproach, that had it not been for the diary, or what the diary stood for, everything would be different. I should not be sitting in this drab, flowerless room, where the curtains were not even drawn to hide the cold rain beating on the windows, or contemplating the accumulation of the past and the duty it imposed on me to sort it out. I should be sitting in another room, rainbow-hued, looking not into the past, but into the future. And I should not be sitting alone. Diary for the year 1900, it said in a copperplate script. The entries were few. Tea with C's, mater and pater, very jolly. Then, more sophisticated, jolly decent tea with L's people, muffins, scones, cakes and strawberry jam. Walk to Kingsgate Castle. M showed me his new knife. This was the first reference to Maudsley. Maudsley had never been a special friend of mine. He was a dark-haired, sallow, round-faced boy, a year younger than I was, and distinguished neither in work nor games, but he managed to get by. We discovered a mild liking for each other, chose each other as companions for our walks. He told me his home was called Brandham Hall, and I told him that mine was called Court Place. Of the two, he was the more impressed, for he was, as I afterwards discovered, a snob. The name Court Place predisposed him in my favour, as I suspect it also did his mother. But they were mistaken, for Court Place was quite an ordinary house, set back a little in the village behind looped chains, of which I was rather proud. Behind the house we had an acre of garden intersected by a stream. My father's talents went into his hobbies, which were book collecting and gardening. For his career, he had accepted a routine occupation and was quite content to be a bank manager in Salisbury. My mother, though unworldly, was always attracted to the things of the world. She felt that if circumstances had been different, she could have taken her place in it. She liked gossip, she liked social occasions, and to be dressed right for them. An invitation to some function in Salisbury would always set her aflutter. After my father died, what little social consequence we had diminished. I did not tell Maudsley this, of course. not from any wish for concealment, but because our code discouraged personal disclosures. He looked up to me, and I felt that his esteem was decidedly worth having. The last entry in the diary was for Thursday, the 26th of July. I knew that all the events in early July were astir in me. I had kept the memories, buried all these years, but they were there, complete. If my 12-year-old self were to reproach me, "Why have you grown up such a dull dog? Why have you spent your time in dusty libraries cataloguing other people's books instead of writing your own?" I should have an answer ready. Well, it was you who let me down. You flew too near the sun, and you were scorched. This cindery creature is what you made me. To which he might reply, "But you've had half a century to get over it, half the glorious 20th century. You needn't have run away." At the time, my attitude to the diary was twofold and contradictory. I was intensely proud of it and wanted everybody at school to see it, and at the same time I had an instinct for secrecy and wanted nobody to see it. I tried to get the best of both worlds. I hinted at the possibility of hidden treasure, but I did not say what it was. I put the diary in my locker, which I purposely left ajar. Unfortunately, my use of the word vanquished to describe our defeat of Lambton House, our great rivals at football, proved to be my undoing. Within a few hours I was set upon by a mob of grinning urchins, led by Jenkins and Strode, chanting, "Played Lambton House, Lambton House, vanquished, vanquished, vanquished." I was borne to the ground with Strode in the forefront, bestriding me and pressing his fingers under my eyes. Retiring with the diary to the lavatory, I cut my finger, dipped my pen in blood, and transcribed 2 curses into the diary. Each took a whole page. After 2 names printed in block letters, Jenkins and Strode, were some figures and some algebraical symbols. On the next page I wrote, "After curse 3, the victim dies. Given under my hand and written in my blood, by order, the Avenger." That night in bed, my smarting eyes shed tears for the first time. It was my 2nd term at school. I had never been unpopular before, and I didn't know what to make of it. The next day I wandered about by myself. At break, a boy I hardly knew came up and said, "Have you heard the news about Jenkins and Strode? They were out on the roofs last night, and Jenkins slipped, and Strode tried to hold him, but he couldn't. They're both in the sand with concussion of the brain, and their people have been sent for. Jenkins's mater and pater have arrived in a cab with blinds drawn down, and Jenkins's mater is in black already." Afterwards, I was quite a hero, for nobody, it turned out, had much liking for Jenkins and Strode, though nobody had raised a finger to stop them ragging me. I was secretly terrified at what I had done, and I devised a number of spells intended to make the victims recover. I was the hero of the hour, and though my vogue did not last long, I never quite lost it. I was no longer made fun of if I used long words. It was then that I began to cherish a dream of becoming a writer, perhaps the greatest writer of the 20th century. The last weeks of the Easter term were the happiest of my school days so far. For the first time, I felt I was someone. Jenkins and Strode, who had had some bones broken, did not in fact return until the autumn. I was urged to put out more spells, one of which was that we should be given a whole holiday. Into this last I put all the psychic force I had, and I was rewarded. Soon after the beginning of June, we had an outbreak of measles. By half-term, more than half the school was down with it, and soon after came the dramatic announcement that we were to break up. It never occurred to me that I might get measles. The appearance of my shiny black trunk with its imposing rounded roof, flanked by my father's brown wooden tuck-box, which still showed by a patch of darker paint where my initials had been painted over his, had an overwhelming effect on my spirits. The ecstasy of escape continued in the train. Both coming and going, the school was allotted a special coach. It was a saloon of a kind not found now, upholstered in deep red plush, the seats facing one another and impregnated with a most searching smell of train smoke and tobacco. Joy shone on every face. Playful punches were exchanged. Nonchalantly, I took out my diary and began to decorate the date. Last year, 1899, had been a disastrous year. In January, my father died after a brief illness, and in the summer I had diphtheria with complications. Almost all of July and August I had spent in bed. They were phenomenally hot months, and I decided that the summer of 1900 would be a cool one. I should arrange for that, and the clerk of the weather hearkened to me. On July the 1st, the temperature was in the 60s, and we had had only 3 hot days, the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th of June. I had marked them in my diary with a cross. The 1st of July also brought Mrs. Maudsley's invitation. It was written in a large, bold, sloping hand. My mother showed me the letter. "If neither of our boys has come out in spots by July the 10th, wrote Mrs. Maudsley, "I should be so pleased if you would allow Leo to spend the rest of the month with us. Marcus has told me a lot about him, and I am most anxious to make his acquaintance. I understand that Leo is an only child, and I promise you that we will take great care of him. You may be surprised that we should be spending the season in the country, but neither my husband nor I have been very well, and town is no place for a small boy in the summer." I pored over the letter and soon committed it to memory. It was almost the first time I had felt myself real to somebody who didn't know me. "Norfolk is such a long way off, and you've never been away from home before, to stay with strangers, I mean," said my mother. "But I've been to school," I argued. She had to admit that. "But I wish you were not going for so long," she said. "You may not like it, and then what will you do?" "I'm sure I shall enjoy myself," I told her. "And you'll be there for your birthday," she said. "We've always been together for your birthday." I said nothing to that. I had forgotten about my birthday. "Promise me you'll let me know if you're not happy," she said. I didn't like to say again that I knew I should be happy, so I promised. But still she wasn't satisfied. "Perhaps you'll get measles after all," she told me hopefully, "or Marcus will." What should I take with me? I shouldn't need summer clothes. My mother saw eye to eye with me on this. She believed that thick clothes were somehow safer than thin ones. And she had another motive, economy. The hot months of last year I had spent in bed, so I had no hot weather outfit suitable to my size. I was growing fast. "But try not to get hot," she said. "Getting hot is always a risk." In imagination, often in apprehension, she tried to foresee the life I would lead. Her face grew wistful, and I knew she wished she was going with me. As the day of departure drew nearer, my feelings underwent a change. Now it was I who wanted to get out of going, and my mother who held me to it. I tried a spell for making spots come out on my chest, but it didn't work. On the last evening, my mother and I sat together in the drawing-room on the 2-humped settee which reminded me of a dromedary in profile. It was our one formal room, and I think my mother may have chosen it for moral effect. I suspect she had something special to say, but she never said it, for I was too near tears to be open to practical or moral counsels. The 8th of July was a Sunday, and the following day I left for Brandham Hall.
John Rowe was reading Part 1 of The Go-Between by L.P. Hartley, abridged by Micheline Wander and produced by Cherry Cookson.